Good morning. My name is Anton Ziska, and today I'm doing a presentation on Asian American and Pacific Islander eating disorders and resources. This is for Heritage University and the YWCA Plus Psychology 503 Eating Disorders and Body Liberation class. So let's get started. Okay, so a little bit of background about the AAPI communities. So it's a broad term, but it encompasses those who have heritage from Central Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Eastern Asia, and all of the Pacific Islands. Um, and there is nuance in who is considered AAPI and who's not, and I think that also depends on like the individual as well, how they prefer to identify, because it is such um, a broad community with a lot of diversity. But looking at the research, 0.10% of all Asian Americans experience anorexia nervosa during their lifetimes. 1.50% experience bulimia, 1.24% experience binge eating disorder, and 4.47 or 4.74 experience binge eating behaviors in their lifetime. Um, of those who've experienced an eating disorder, Asian Americans typically had the lowest rate of service utilization of any ethnic group. And this means that Asian Americans or with an eating disorder are seeking help in smaller numbers than other groups. Um, Based off some research coming from Asian American college students, there's reports that there are higher rates of food restrictions compared to their white peers, and higher rates of purging, muscle building, and cognitive restraint than their white or non-Asian college students. And we'll get into some of the reasons for that and the risk factors for that as well in a little bit. Um, the research regarding Pacific Islander populations was kind of sparse. There are literature reviews saying that there's a lot of gaps in research when it comes to eating disorders in the Pacific Islands. But some research that I was able to find through the National Eating Disorder Association, or NEDA, is that Maori and Pacific people of New Zealand experience about a 1.7% life prevalence of eating disorders across different various groups. Fiji surprisingly has 42% of adolescent girls reporting purging behaviors and 4% of adult women reporting symptoms consistent with binge eating disorders. And finally, Guam, about 10.9% of adolescent females and 5.1% of adolescent males report purging by vomiting or laxative use. So getting into some of the risk factors. What are some of the risk factors for AAPI communities? Risk factors are conditions or traits that are either inherent to the patient or to the circumstance that they're in, which increases the likelihood of a negative outcome for them, whether that's poor therapeutic experience or their symptoms of eating disorder, in this example, worsening. So AAPI communities experience a unique sociocultural and psychological pressures that contribute to things like their body image, eating habits, and how they feel about their body presentation, and their appearance satisfaction. So some of these risk factors include dual cultural impacts. Uh, so we know that because of globalization, because of colonization, there's a lot of influence, and just being in the United States, uh, there's a lot of influence of Western beauty standards competing with the beauty standards that are from their own heritages and own cultures. So that clashing of two cultures has been a huge thing for, especially for second generations API. Um, we look at Eastern beauty standards. Thinness has been the beauty standard ever since the Han Dynasty, especially in East Asia, which historically promoted desirability, femininity, and this increased likelihood of getting married, climbing up the social ladder, which leads to wealth and power, and all of those are really important for these communities, and that's why thinness was looked upon so highly. In the Pacific Islands, on the other hand, they tend to have a more favorable appreciation for larger bodies. But now, because of globalization, colonization, and the obesity interventions, uh, a lot of Pacific Islanders are experiencing conflicting messages about what bodies should look like. Um, I found this a really interesting fact, but in the Nauru Islands, there's a term for satisfaction and feeling healthy. It's called pweda, Pweda, and it also means the same thing as fullness and distension. I found this image on the right interesting too. So this is from Hinduism. It depicts Shiva as Annapurna's consort, and older photos, especially or older paintings and drawings of the gods, especially before colonization or early on, uh, usually depicted them with larger bellies. So Annapurna uh, is a combination of two words, Anna meaning food and Purna meaning filled completely. And I thought this is really interesting because this nourishment, at least within Indian cultures, not only provides nourishment to the body, but also nourishment to the soul and for enlightenment. She gives us energy to attain knowledge, and I thought that was so fascinating. Going back to risk factors, another risk factor is sexual objectification and racial microaggressions. So this can be seen through API individuals increasing their self-awareness and constant self-monitoring, which leads to the development of an eating disorder. Physical representation of API in media is also really big, especially because there's a stereotype about a lot of Asian American men specifically being weak or not sexually attractive. Um, and collectivist values such as parental expectations about honor, achievement, and appearance. We see this very often in a lot of AAPI communities about, for example, mothers playing a critical role in shaping body image through comments about weight and appearance, sometimes putting pressure on body dissatisfaction that the individual didn't carry already, but was added on by family and society and all the different areas of their life. So, what are some barriers to seeking help or support with treatment? Uh, there's a report from SAMHSA showing that, kind of like as we talked about earlier, Asian adults have the lowest rate of mental health service utilization of any ethnic group. Um, and this includes eating disorders. So there is a lot of stigma around this. There's acculturation barriers too. Well, sorry, I'll get to acculturation barriers in a bit. Uh, there is a cultural emphasis on thinness, kind of like we talked about earlier, family environment, criticizing weight and appearance, and also often a lack of awareness of signs, symptoms, and severity of the eating disorder. Often there's a language barrier, just like any ethnic group. Uh, so for those that are, first generation or English is not their primary language, it's very difficult to be able to communicate um, not only linguistically but also culturally what is happening or why these symptoms are coming up and what this means deeper. Um, now acculturation barriers. So there's some research showing that second generation Asian American women reported significantly more disordered eating than either the first generation or the third generation. And this indicates that this is a risk factor, having acculturation barriers. And this comes from the bicultural stress and also this perceived pressure to achieve. And then finally, the model minority myth, which we know is the the false belief that Asian Americans are the best minority because they worked the hardest. And that's completely false and rooted in white supremacy, and it's a tool for white supremacy. But it harms every ethnicity. But particularly within AAPI communities, it harms Southeast Asians and Pacific Islanders especially, because they might not get the eating disorder support that they need, because they often have to feel like they have to conform to the model minority myth of AAPIs being successful and looking a certain way, having certain cultural practices, and it just won't be. It becomes nuanced and difficult for everyone. And finally, another barrier to seeking help that I is very, very important, and I really connect with is that food means more than just food. Um, this implied meaning of food is tied to cultural identity, emotions, and ancestral connections in API communities. So when there are changes in the relationship to food, it causes confusion in AAPI individuals and how they express themselves, how they identify, how they navigate treatment. um, Especially within like Pacific Islander communities too. Food is not only biological, but is also social. And there's themes of sharing, respect, social prestige, and festivity that are central to the meaning of food. So now we'll go into some resources. The first resource, well, I'll start with some of the eating disorder support groups and harm reduction circles. So one that I really appreciate is Leap for Asian. So Leap stands for Leading Eating Disorder Awareness Project for AAPI. And some of their work is to develop community resources for the AAPI community, offering individual counseling or group counseling, bridging that gap between North American approaches for helping eating disorders and providing this cultural sensitivity uh, with discussion for recovery. Their website is fantastic too. They have a whole directory of API eating disorder professionals uh, that you can choose based off like online, individual, in person, group, um, a variety of choices. The Yellow Chair Collective, uh, yeah, I really like them too. So yellow, it's a color that represents enlightenment, hope, and creativity, while the chair is a safe place to rest from the pains of the world. So the Yellow Chair Collective provides therapy specifically for Asian Americans, taking into consideration the sociocultural traumas or sociocultural factors, intergenerational trauma, racial discrimination, and all of those are factors in your eating disorder treatment. And they also follow, it's kind of like a 12 step, but they have an 8-week program that is really incredible. So I didn't write these down, but um, the the structure is navigating uh, eating disorder and recovery, navigating ambivalence and cognitive distortion, build tolerance for difficult emotions, utilize internal cues and external cues for eating, cultivate body respect, unpack your body image, cultivate self-compassion, and ultimately the closing takeaways. Project Heal is another resource that's really good. They have their own harm reduction circles, but their biggest resource is that they have a very equitable, resourceful website where they're able to show all the eating disorder resources that exist in your area or online, and you're able to break it down by your needs, whether it's being a high weight or in a larger body, whether it's being LGBTQ or neurodivergent, BIPOC, friends and family resources, and meal support. Nalgona Positivity Pride. So this is a resource that utilizes digital media and grassroots education to leverage those who have been left out of the mainstream narrative. So eating disorders and recovery, or of eating disorders and recovery, and they draw from indigenous knowledge, and they kind of describe it as matriarchal wisdom and punk influences. Uh, it's really different and it's really fascinating, and they use all of that in the name of body liberation, mental health equity. They use art education, activism, cultural affirmation, community building, and narrative therapy, all of these things to help you through your eating disorder. And one of their main programs for that is called Sage and Spoon program. This one is Seattle-based, which is amazing. Uh, so the Sunrise Nutrition Seattle, or Sunrise Nutrition, it's a nutrition counseling and mental health therapy program for binge eating, eating disorders, and body image. So they have a program called the Community Table. You're able to uh, check in to this online platform. It's $5 drop in, or you can apply for a scholarship too. And it's a meal support group for non-white, Black, Indigenous, and folks of color with chronic dieting, recovery, and eating disorders. So it's HAES aligned, it's fat positive, LGBTQ affirming, and immigrant affirming. And then the next two uh, on the therapist slide. So or these are two directories that are really beneficial. The first one is through Leap for Asian. Kind of like as I mentioned earlier, they have a big selection of therapists that are available for eating disorder support groups and harm reduction circles. The next one is more broad, but it's all Black, Indigenous, and people of color eating disorder providers. And then the next one is a little Google Doc that's made that has kind of the same thing. It breaks it down to name, pronoun, ethnicity, other identities that are important to them, whether they ED, disordered eating, or IE, their location, if they're offered virtually or not, and their contact information. And finally, I'll leave it with another resource that I thought was really fascinating. So she's on Instagram, and her name is Nirvana Abu Gabal, but her page is called Intuitive Muslima. She's a Muslim woman who uh, she's also a registered dietitian, and she relates the eating disorder recovery process to Islam, her religion. So that's the basis of her healing process. She helps to reframe healing through Islam. And I'm not Muslim, but I have found this resource really impressive and really fascinating. So I just wanted to drop a example of some of her posts, uh, where she takes diet culture and the things that we tell ourselves about how we should feel about our body and the food that we're ingesting versus what uh, Islam views about health and the body. So really beautiful resource. I highly recommend checking it out. And thank you so much for watching. Here's my references.